Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to really get into the bedrock of management thinking, stuff you'll see everywhere, right?
Absolutely. We're looking at the history of management thought. Think of it as the intellectual DNA of modern business.
So, what's the plan? Where do we start?
Okay, the mission is basically a fast forward through management philosophy. We'll
Hmm.
start way back in the late 19th century, very rational, almost machine-like thinking,
Right.
and trace it all the way up to the more flexible approaches we see today. We'll hit the big schools, classical behavioral systems, and finally, the contingency viewpoint.
And the sources really emphasize that starting point, don't they? It was all about rationality and making organizations and workers as efficient as possible, just pure output.
Exactly, like applying physics to people.
Yeah.
The focus was pure efficiency.
Yeah.
But we'll see how quickly that idea started to, well, fray at the edges when reality hit.
What reality was that?
The reality that you're dealing with humans, not cogs in a machine. Unpredictable social beings, that changed everything.
Okay, so let's kick off with that first big era, the classical approach. You mentioned scientific management, administrative management, bureaucratic. Where do we start?
We have to start with Frederick Winslow Taylor,
Hmm.
F.W. Taylor. He's really the father of scientific management,
The efficiency guy.
the original efficiency guy. He was obsessed, truly obsessed, with boosting operational productivity. His whole thing was using systematic scientific study for, well, everything,
Yeah.
every method, every tool.
And he believed there was just one right way to do any job.
One best way, yeah, that was his core belief. Find it, measure it, time it, and then train everyone to do it exactly that way.
Yeah.
No deviations.
So like stopwatches and clipboards.
Pretty much. He wasn't just watching, he was actively experimenting, finding the optimal pace, then making sure workers stuck to it. And he laid out these four key principles for managers.
Okay, what were they?
Well, first, managers had to systematically study how work was actually done, gather up all that informal knowledge the workers had.
Right, make it official.
Exactly. Second, codify those best methods into written rules, standard operating procedures or SOPs.
Makes sense.
Third, carefully select workers. Find people with the right abilities for that specific task, and then train them meticulously in the one best way.
Okay, so specialization.
Highly specialized. And the fourth principle kind of tied it all together,
Hmm.
set a fair performance standard, and then critically create an incentive-based system. Hit the standard, get rewarded.
The money motivation.
Very much so. And, it's kind of brilliant in its own way. It really laid the groundwork, the ideology, for the modern assembly line. Mass production owes a lot to Taylor.
So he basically took the art out of work and made it a science controlled by management.
That's a great way to put it. Before Taylor, the skilled craftsman knew best. After Taylor, management dictated the best way based on their studies. Knowledge shifted.
But okay, if it was so revolutionary, why do our notes immediately talk about the demise of scientific management? What went wrong?
Well, the critique is crucial. Taylor's laser focus on systematization was also his biggest blind spot, the human element. He really did see workers as interchangeable parts.
Just motivated by pay.
Yeah, simplistic motivational assumptions. He ignored their ideas, their creativity. It led to jobs becoming incredibly boring, de-skilled.
And ripe for exploitation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you see the pushback almost immediately in the historical record. Union membership surged between 1880 and 1914. Workers weren't just accepting this purely mechanical view of their work.
Okay, so that's the micro level, Taylor focusing on the individual worker. But you mentioned others were looking bigger picture.
Right. While Taylor was optimizing the shop floor in the U.S., thinkers in Europe were focused on the organization as a whole.
Ah, the forest, not just the trees.
Precisely. Which brings us to administrative management. And the key figure there is Henri Fayol, over in France.
What was his angle?
Fayol wanted to improve the efficiency of the entire organization, not just specific tasks. And his huge contribution, something we still use every day, was identifying the core functions of management.
Planning, organizing.
Planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. He was the first to really define those as distinct managerial activities.
And he also gave us principles for structuring the organization, right?
Yes, his principles of administration, things that seem obvious now but were revolutionary then, like unity of command.
And only one boss.
Exactly. And line of authority, that clear chain of command from top to bottom. You see Fayol's ghost in pretty much every org chart.
Was he also more focused on the people side than Taylor?
A bit, yes. He talked about esprit de corps, building team spirit and unity, and stability of tenure of personnel. He argued that keeping employees long-term was vital for building skills and knowledge. Constant turnover was inefficient.
So a more holistic view, but still focused on structure and efficiency.
Definitely still within that classical rational framework. Now, around the same time, you have Max Weber in Germany developing his theory of bureaucracy.
Bureaucracy. That word doesn't exactly scream efficiency today.
Uh, no, it often means the opposite now, doesn't it? Red tape. But for Weber, bureaucracy was the ideal, the most rational and efficient way to structure a large organization.
How so? What were his principles?
His core idea was about authority. He said formal authority should come from your position in the hierarchy based on competence, what he called rational power.
Not who you know or who your father was.
Exactly. It was a direct challenge to traditional power structures based on social standing or inheritance.
Hmm.
Meritocracy was key. Positions should be based on qualifications, not connections.
That must have been radical.
Oh, absolutely. And to make it work, he emphasized formalization, a clear system of written rules, procedures, norms, everything documented, everything standardized to minimize bias and ensure predictability.
So Taylor, Fayol, Weber, all aiming for rationality, efficiency, predictability, just at different levels: task, organization, structure.
That's a perfect summary of the classical approach. But, as we hinted, that purely rational view couldn't hold forever. The human element started demanding attention.
Which leads us where? To the behavioral school.
Exactly. This school shifted the focus dramatically towards individual attitudes, behaviors, group dynamics, and the absolute cornerstone here is the Hawthorne studies.
Ah, yes, Elton Mayo. What happened there?
Well, they started out trying to prove the classical ideas, actually. They tweaked things like lighting levels, pay incentives, expecting to see a direct correlation with output.
But they didn't.
Nope. The results were all over the place. No clear link between the physical changes and productivity. It was confusing.
So what was the explanation?
The big takeaway was that psychological factors mattered more. The social setting, feeling valued, good human relations, that's what boosted productivity. It gave rise to the famous Hawthorne effect. The idea that simply paying special attention to people, making them feel important, part of something that alone improves performance. They were responding to the attention, not necessarily the changes in lighting.
So the informal social structure of the group was more powerful than the formal rules.
Precisely. It proved the power of the informal organization. Group norms, relationships, social dynamics, these were driving behavior more than management directives. This forced a major rethink.
And that rethink connects to McGregor's theory X and theory Y, right?
Absolutely. Douglas McGregor basically said managers operate based on one of two fundamental assumptions about workers. Theory X is the old-school, classical view.
Workers are lazy, need to be pushed, prefer being told what to do.
Essentially, yes. They dislike work, avoid responsibility, need coercion and control through rewards and punishments. That requires a very hands-on directive management style.
Like Taylor's approach needed.
Exactly. But Theory Y reflects the Hawthorne lessons. It assumes work is natural, people want to do well, they exercise self-direction, seek responsibility, are inherently creative.
So managers should empower them, give them freedom.
Right. Create conditions where people can achieve their own goals by directing their efforts toward the organization's goals. It's a fundamental shift in perspective, from control to facilitation.
Okay, so behavior becomes central. But there was another trend happening around the same time: management science.
Yeah, sort of in parallel, especially kicking off during World War II. You had these huge, complex logistical problems, moving troops, allocating resources. This led to the rise of the management science school or operations research.
Or,
Yeah.
this sounds more like the classical approach again, numbers math.
It does. In a way, it focuses heavily on quantitative techniques, mathematical modeling, statistical analysis to improve decision-making. Think optimizing supply chains, scheduling production, inventory control.
Really complex problems that need precise answers.
Exactly. Very powerful for those kinds of structured problems where you can quantify the variables.
But I sense a but coming.
Well, the limitation is pretty clear when you think about theory Y, right? Quantitative models can't fully capture or predict human behavior. People aren't always rational actors.
And the models need good data, maybe assumptions that aren't realistic.
Often, yes. You might need perfect information, or you have to simplify the situation so much that the model loses its connection to reality. So, great for specific problems, but not a universal answer for managing people.
Which perfectly sets up the need for integration, moving beyond these separate schools. Where did that lead?
It led towards more holistic views. First, the systems viewpoint. This really changed the game by looking at the organization not as a machine, but as an open system.
Meaning it interacts with its environment.
Constantly. taking in inputs, resources, information, labor transforming them, and sending outputs back out. And crucially, it sees the organization as made up of interconnected subsystems.
Like departments, sales, production, finance.
Exactly. And the key concept here is synergy. The idea that these subsystems, working together effectively, can produce more than the sum of their individual parts.
Right.
1 + 1 = 3 kind of thing.
So you can't just optimize one part in isolation.
You really can't. A change in marketing impacts production, which impacts finance. Everything's connected. Managers have to think systemically.
Okay, that makes sense. And from there, we get to the contingency perspective.
Yes, this is arguably where modern management thought lands. The contingency perspective basically throws out the core idea of the classical approach, that there's one best way to manage.
It rejects universal rules.
Completely. It says the right way to manage, the best structure, the most effective leadership style. It all depends. It's contingent on the specific situation.
Depends on what?
On the environment, the technology being used, the size of the organization, the capabilities of the employees, the specific challenges being faced. Every situation is unique.
So management becomes about diagnosis and adaptation.
That's the essence of it. Understand the context, then choose the approach that fits that context. No more universal prescriptions. This is vital when we start looking globally.
Which brings us to more contemporary ideas, like the Japanese management approach.
Right. Post-war Japan developed management styles that presented a real contrast and challenge to the dominant Western models.
What were some key differences?
Things like a much longer-term perspective, a focus on building partnerships with employees, more collective decision-making.
That ringy system.
Exactly. A ringy system circulating proposals for broad consensus before approval. It's slower, but builds deep buy-in. Also, a stronger community orientation, a sense of shared fate.
And they were good at borrowing ideas too, weren't they?
Very. That concept of itokodori, actively adopting and adapting useful ideas from other nations, it shows that contingency thinking in practice.
And this influenced Western thinking too, like Theory Z.
Yeah, William Ochi's Theory Z tried to blend the best of both. It took ideas like longer-term employment and consensus from Japan, but kept the American focus on individual responsibility and performance, a hybrid approach.
We also had the excellence approach, Peters and Waterman.
Right, in search of excellence. They studied successful American companies and found common threads. Things like being action-oriented, staying close to customers, fostering autonomy and entrepreneurship within the company.
So treating people as assets, not just costs.
Fundamentally, it reinforced the behavioral lessons: engaged, empowered people drive success.
So looking back at this whole journey, we started with Taylor's almost obsessive focus on pure mechanical efficiency.
Then realized through Hawthorne that the human social element is critical.
Then added layers of quantitative analysis and systems thinking.
And finally arrived at the contingency view. There's no single magic bullet. It all depends on the context. Management evolved from seeking control to mastering adaptation.
And that context piece is really the final challenge, isn't it? Especially thinking about the source material being for the University of Colombo MBA program. There's that slide showing Western and Japanese approaches.
Yes, converging, but needing to be filtered through local factors, economic, political, cultural realities. The role of the Sri Lankan manager isn't just applying Theory X or Theory Z off the shelf.
It's about synthesis, taking this global history of thought we've just raced through.
Taylor, Fayol, Mayo, Weber, McGregor, the systems view, the Japanese innovations.
And figuring out how to adapt it. How do you reinterpret that old quest for the one best way when you have unique local conditions, maybe colonial legacies, specific economic pressures?
That's the real deep dive, isn't it?
I get
It's not
that.
just knowing the theories. It's about building something effective, something context contingent right where you
Yeah.
are. That's the core challenge of management today.